The following is a CNN special report.
One plant, more than 400 compounds, which we know can treat dozens of different ailments, but one in particular may surprise you.
Hello.
Autism. It affects millions of children. They can be nonverbal, delayed, and sometimes even violent, injuring others and themselves. A cure, elusive. But now more than a dozen states have approved cannabis to treat autism. And for some, it's the jackpot.
Okay, ready?
Time for mommy, time for drops.
But for others, it's a gamble.
Every day that I give the medicine to my daughter is a potential day for me ending up with a felony.
It's like the death penalty of family law.
What if it was your child? Would you take the risk? An ancient plant to treat a mysterious disorder of the brain. This is Weed 6, Marijuana and Autism. You're about to see Kara Zartler's life. I do want to warn you, this will be hard to watch. Kara has severe autism.
Kara. Stop it. Stop.
Her fits are dangerous, frequent, and disturbingly violent.
I decided to journal all of her hitting, and I started back in 2016.
This is her mother, Christy. We met up at the Zartler's home in Texas.
Closed-fisted punches to her face, hold her down.
Aggression and self-injurious behaviors are unfortunately very common, especially in children with severe autism.
For 3 decades, Dr. Doris Trauner was the chief of pediatric neurology at UC San Diego Neurosciences and Pediatrics departments.
Even some children who are higher functioning will have self-injurious behaviors or aggressive behaviors. Anything from repetitively banging their head against a wall, to hitting their head with their hands, to pinching themselves.
Is there any idea why that happens as part of the autism spectrum?
It may be very similar to a lot of the other repetitive behaviors that they have.
Autism,
You're beautiful.
ASD for autism spectrum disorder, is by definition a wide array of behaviors. But mild or severe, the two core symptoms are social communication challenges, 1/3 are nonverbal, and second, restrictive or repetitive behaviors, like rocking, flapping, even hitting.
Let's take a drink, girl.
Particularly challenging for the Zartlers, Kara is part of the 25% of children with ASD who are aggressive, throwing objects, intentionally breaking things, hitting people, including themselves, making life unimaginably challenging for Kara and her parents. But life has never been easy for Kara.
I went and did the blood test. My levels were high, and they said, "Oh, you're pregnant."
After years of battling infertility, Christy was pregnant with twins.
It was 21 weeks gestation. I feel this pain immediately.
You were incoherent.
He found me with my head on my sink area, and I had already vomited, and I was already unconscious.
Wow.
I had a stroke.
It would be touch and go for 72 hours, doctors monitoring her and the baby's every move. And then 5 days after the stroke, Christy's water broke.
When they came out of the, they were so small, right? They were just so tiny.
Baby A, named Keely, was off the ventilator in 2 weeks and had no complications from the premature birth. But baby B, Kara, would struggle from the very beginning. At 10 hours old, she had a brain bleed. Yet, after months of round-the-clock care in the NICU, Kara finally came home, diagnosed with cerebral palsy. Christy and Mark thought this would be Kara's biggest challenge, At 9 months, she started intense physical and speech therapy, and Christy kept careful track of her daughter's progress as she learned to walk and talk. By October 2002, Kara was almost 3 years old and could speak 68 words.
Apple, bubbles, knock knock.
Woof woof.
Yep.
And then October 2002, the list ends.
Right. You know, I've heard her say mama.
I know it's hard to imagine that.
I do hear her in my dreams. So that's hurtful.
I can imagine.
That's
I'm
a
so
hard
sorry.
thing.
I'm so sorry.
As the words stopped, the hitting started.
From age 4 to age 6 was really hard because we would take turns on who was going to hold and lay with her and make sure she's not going to punch her face and break her nose and break her eye sockets. Watch what you're doing. That's right. And the developmental pediatricians say it's autism.
And that was around age 4.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like to hear?
Oh, terrifying. I knew nothing about it.
But Christy would quickly learn there is no cure. There are no definitive treatments, especially for someone who had such severe autism as Kara. Completely nonverbal. One night, she repeatedly hit herself for 12 hours, nonstop.
At that point, it was like, well, we need to go a different direction, you know, and so that's when the antipsychotics that's when they started right after that.
Kara started taking a cocktail of medications called psychotropics. They are very powerful drugs often used for adults and adolescents with psychiatric disorders like schizophrenia.
The antipsychotics did something, right? They just changed it from a constant to, you know, an every 15-minute kind of thing.
Definitely an improvement, but with a tremendous cost. Mark says the drugs left Kara unable to do anything, not present or aware of her surroundings. The little girl they had longed for, that little toddler full of words and smiles, was lost to them.
It's permanent grief.
Yeah.
She was robbed of a life.
A life her parents would do anything to get back, even if it meant breaking the law. That, when we come back. In 2009, the suburbs of Dallas. The powerful drugs that once helped severely autistic 10-year-old Kara Zartler were no longer working.
The pharmacist said, "This is the highest dose I've ever seen a 45-pound person on. This to me is equivalent to maybe a 2,000-pound horse."
At that time, Kara was in school with 3,000 hits a day.
You heard that right. She would hit herself 3,000 times in a 7-hour school day. That is more than 7 strikes every minute. The thing about a story like this,
Want to eat something?
it defined you. And everybody soon knew just how bad things had become. One day, the Zartler's neighbor recommended cannabis, and not CBD, which has now become more commonly accepted as a medicine, but THC, the psychoactive part of the plant that gets you high or stoned, he said. He thought that THC might help calm Kara. The Zartlers were willing to try anything, but their home state of Texas has the most restrictive medical cannabis laws in the country, so they couldn't do it legally. And the Zartlers did have their own reservations.
It's illegal, and there's got to be illegal for a reason.
It took us a pretty long time to get over the stigma.
A stigma that this woman also understands all too well.
When we first started, nobody had really thought of using cannabis in a pediatric setting.
Many years ago, award-winning novelist Marie Myung-Gok Lee wrote a provocative Washington Post article about giving her son cannabis. But only now was she willing to sit down, talk about it, and introduce us to Jason, who she calls Jay.
I think one of the biggest mischaracterizations that I got was, oh, you don't want to deal with your kid you know, you're drugging your kid.
Don't be done soon.
Ironic, even hypocritical, she said, because the medications initially prescribed for Jay were considerably stronger than cannabis.
They are essentially tranquilizers. And if you wanted to think of it even more uncharitably, they are kind of a chemical lobotomy.
Like the Zartlers, Marie tried almost every conventional and alternative treatment to help her son. None of them worked, and it was brutal.
When the ritual was done, the monks started eating. As soon as he got up, he would just start to scream and wail and writhe, and they couldn't help him. You know, as a parent, that's the worst thing. Like, I couldn't comfort him. He didn't want to be touched. And then he had a lot of aggressions. He would attack us all the time.
The college professor and award-winning writer used her skills to search for answers. Consistently, her research kept leading her back to cannabis. But Jay's neurologist was initially reluctant to even consider it.
He was very worried that if he helped us get a license by prescribing it, that if it ever got out that he was prescribing pot, that was just going to look very bad for him.
Now remember, it was 2008. Barely a dozen states had legalized medicinal cannabis, and federally, it was still illegal. The thought of giving it to a child? Unimaginable. But they were lucky. They lived in Rhode Island, where cannabis was legal.
He was probably the youngest person in the nation to have a cannabis license.
With that license in hand, Marie was able to access cannabis from a grower in Rhode Island. But she was still nervous. There was no roadmap for a strain or a particular dosage.
And I'm a big guidelines person, so not having a protocol was probably the most difficult part for me, because what am I doing?
So what Marie decided to do, make herself the guinea pig. She would try different strains and doses first. And then if she felt okay, she would give them to her son.
This is my writer diary.
In fact, she shared a journal entry from one of those early days.
I feel an abject joy, and Jay can feel it too. Wow. So how weird, yeah, how random. And then here we have that Jason had 0 aggressions.
That's not something you had written probably for a long time, if ever.
No.
And it was Jay's story that inspired many others to also try cannabis.
Okay.
All right, looks like she's ready.
We're gonna...
Including the Zartlers.
All right, girl.
It was on a car ride like this when the Zartlers first tried marijuana. Rides that before cannabis they never even dreamed of taking, because this would happen. But one day, in June of 2009, they had no choice. Kara had an important doctor's appointment 5 hours away in Galveston, Texas. Christy and Mark decided to try the marijuana brownies that their neighbor had made.
I just gave it to her, and she ate it, and it was about an hour where she was sitting, no longer rocking, no longer hand flapping, no longer hitting, and she's sitting there and she's looking out the window and she's looking at me and smiling. It was like a miracle.
I got to see it up close when I went on a drive with them after Kara had a dose of cannabis.
We would never be able to do this.
This is an easier life for everybody.
Yes.
An easier life, but one that would ultimately put their whole family in jeopardy. That story is later. But first, why would it work? How would it work? Unraveling the science of cannabis and autism. In Jerusalem, in a modest apartment, lives a larger-than-life presence in the cannabis world.
Dr. Meshulam.
Our visit, while not in person because of COVID, is a virtual reunion with 91-year-old Dr. Raphael Meshulam.
How are you?
Fine. It's quite a long time since you were here.
I met him nearly a decade ago when we first started on this journey, and he's one of the scientists who changed my mind about cannabis as a medicine. His pioneering research and discovery of THC in the 1960s has him poised to win a Nobel Prize.
Ready?
Time for mommy, time for drop.
So the minute I heard about parents using cannabis to treat their kids with autism, I had to get his thoughts.
Can you give me some idea of how it even came to be that we would be thinking about cannabis to treat autism?
Cannabis works on autism. I strongly believe on the basis of what we have seen in animal models and in people that use cannabis, and the effects are definitely positive. There should be clinical trials. We should look at the doses. This is one of the fields that are very, very promising.
Across town in Jerusalem, another pioneer in cannabis research, Dr. Adi Aran, is doing those exact clinical trials Dr. Mechoulam is talking about.
You led the world's first clinical trial looking at cannabis and autism. What did you find?
So the first study was an open label study, and we knew that there will be some placebo effect, but we were surprised that most parents reported that it substantially helped their children, not only for the disruptive behavior, but also for the social deficits.
Doctors like Igor Grant in California were paying attention to all this, intrigued by the findings of this early research.
Quite a bit of data that's come out of Israel, so there is some evidence of that CBD may be helpful.
So Grant and Dr. Doris Trauner launched their own study with CBD and autism here at the Center for Medicinal Cannabis Research in San Diego.
Tell me about the study design. How did you approach it?
It's what's called a double-blind, placebo-controlled crossover study. Each child gets placebo at one point and CBD at one point, but nobody knows when they're getting it.
Am I going to keep it or are you going to keep it?
So I was actually watching the news, and they had a segment on it that UCSD was looking for participants. Ezra had begun to get a little bit more physical and a little bit more aggressive. At one point I had a lot of bruises on me because he was getting more violent.
Joanne Fouquet's son Ezra was diagnosed with autism when he was 22 months old.
I've heard people compare it to like losing a child. You lose the idea of the child that you were going to have, the life that you were going to have, the life that he's going to have.
He's an herbivore.
He's an herbivore, but what's the name of this one?
Joanne tried everything she could think of to try and help her son.
We tried gluten-free, casein-free, dairy-free. We tried homeopathic remedies.
Had you considered other meds before this, like the psychotropic or neuroleptic type medications?
I didn't want to try any of those just because there were so many side effects.
You ready? Straight or circles?
But for Joanne, when it came to concerns about side effects, cannabis was different.
Keep going, okay.
I saw how much it could help other people, and I thought, I mean, it's all natural. There may not be any real side effects with it. Why not try it?
So Joanne moved forward, enrolling Ezra in the clinical trial.
He was 9 then. What am I going to do in the future as he continues to grow if I'm already having a hard time with his aggression now?
It was that same question Maribel Gonzalez was struggling with when she enrolled her son, Carlos, in a similar trial at Montefiore Health System in New York. A double-blind study with cannabidivarin, or CBDV, which is similar to CBD. I met the lead researcher, Dr. Eric Hollander, along with Maribel and Carlos when the study first launched in 2019.
How optimistic are you that this is going to work?
50-50.
How much potential do you really think is here for CBDV to treat autism?
Well, I think that the big advantages are that it may have much less side effects than some of the other medicines that are used to treat severe disruptive behavior.
In a sign of how quickly things have changed, when this trial began 2 years ago, CBDV, even though it's the non-psychoactive part of the plant, was still considered a Schedule I drug and had to be locked in this safe.
So you ready, Carlos? All right, so I'm going to just squirt it on the side of your mouth, okay?
When you talk about these ups and downs, I mean, how low has it gone?
Pretty low enough that he's attacked me. But me knowing what he's going through, sometimes I have to think for him and myself.
If somebody said there is something that could help treat autism, how would it help you?
Probably, I don't have to worry about like getting angry over like a certain schedule being broken. I'd be pretty happy about that.
Oftentimes, what parents are worried about is the headline is that my kid is taking a cannabis drug, and some people are going to say, well, I can't believe you did that.
And I would be like, well, I'm trying to find something that's gonna help my child, because at the end of the day, that's my child. And I'm thinking for the future, for him.
And that's what we heard again and again. Maribel and Carlos.
Oh, these look so nice.
Marie and Jay.
There we go.
The Zartlers and Kara.
I remember them being desperate and in need of some help, and really needing some balance for Kara and for their own lives.
Remember, none of this comes easy. The Zartler story takes a frightening turn when we come back.
There we go.
The search for cannabis in Texas is challenging for the Zartlers. Dispensaries here are not allowed to produce a product potent enough in THC to best help Kara. Whether it's an emergency rescue medication to stop Kara from punching herself, or like today, when we visit Kara at home, it's busy, and she needs cannabis to help slow things down and focus.
She's like, hello, hello.
Mark gets her medication ready.
I put a 1/4 teaspoon. That's what her dose is.
He starts filling up what he calls Kara's marijuana machine. It's a desktop vaporizer.
I wait till this gets hot to the touch.
It heats up the ground cannabis flower, turning it into a vapor, which Kara can then easily inhale. It's the fastest, most immediate way to get the cannabis into her system, they tell me.
Just a moment.
No, girl, you gotta let go.
Let go, please.
Kara is eager. Just look at her. She seems to know what's coming.
You ready, girl? Okay, let's mellow out.
There we go.
She starts to settle down. At one point, even clapping.
She's like, thank you, sir. She's like, thank you.
Seeming to thank them for the medicine she has received. And take a look. It seems to help her focus a bit and take the edge off.
It's wonderful. She is aware now, and she has the skills to assist and do more. It's phenomenal. I keep thinking I'm going to hear her talk. I'm still having dreams that she's going to speak to me.
But you know, I'm just really struck by that. She's not sedated, but she's clearly not, harming herself, hitting herself.
She's happy.
She's happy.
She took to it real quick in the sense of that she just was like, whoa, I feel better.
I want to be clear. It doesn't end all of her symptoms, but it helps. And Christy believes they could have even better results if they had more options.
I would like to have the ability to go back and forth and try multiple strains to see what would work best for her. And we're just
not in a position to do
right.
Because of the law. Right, yeah.
So for now, their source is underground. A grower they met years ago when Kara was a young child.
I remember them being desperate and in need of some help.
We found Kara's secret supplier, who was willing to meet with us as long as we disguised their identity and did not reveal the location.
We just started testing together very conservatively and documenting the strains and how they worked for Kara and looking at the ones that were best for her.
How did you start to put the puzzle pieces together for something that was totally new like this?
Really, there's a lot of groups and forums on the internet where autism parents that use cannabis as medicine talk about strains and specific ones.
So this Cabinet of Wonders is Jason's earlier card where...
Marie is one of those parent pioneers who has been posting and sharing what has worked for Jay over the years. As one of the youngest people with a legal medical marijuana card, Marie and Jay were able to try all sorts of different doses and strains and documented it all.
He's getting a ton of cannabis, 2 cookies, 3 cookies.
But there was another problem. You see, once they found something that finally worked, they would then worry that the supply would not be consistent and available. After all, this is not the sort of prescription you can simply go to the pharmacy and refill. It's a plant dependent on ethical growers and Mother Nature. There were many times crops got destroyed or growers simply disappeared. And that's a scary proposition if you're a parent whose child is now dependent on cannabis to make his life more livable.
When the grower's plants died because he had a mite infestation, that became a tragedy. That just became, everything started happening again. The whole, the injurious, like, we just saw so completely how it was helping him.
If this all sounds audacious, overwhelming even, it is. And just because it worked for Jay does not mean it would necessarily work for another child, no matter how similar they are. There is not yet the data. There aren't the studies as of now. There isn't the confidence to plunge forward.
It's not a good idea to run out and buy it and just try to use it on your own. It's not clear what dose is the best dose, if it does work, and also whether what you're buying really has what the dose you think it does, because it's unregulated. And then the final thing is that you don't know what else is in that bottle. There could be pesticides, there could be other toxins that we just don't know about.
And so, the story repeats itself. Parents left with new, even well-founded hope, but little direction when it comes to cannabis and their children. Marie made the tough decision to go public, while the Zartlers kept their secret for years. But that's about to change.
By the way, did anybody say don't do this?
The shocking turn in this story when we come back. What you're watching in real time is what happens when Kara Zartler needs to be rescued by cannabis. It's hard to watch, but the Zartlers want you to see this. The repetitive hitting associated with her severe autism seems to vanish as she inhales the cannabis vapor.
Let's be calm. Let's calm.
Her mind and her body seem to slowly relax and calm, something no other medicine could do for her.
I didn't tell her physicians until she was 14. I took her medicated to her neurologist, and he sat there in awe and said, I'm not going to chart this. This won't go in her chart. But I think if you have this positive of a result, you need to continue with this medicine for her.
A medicine that keeps Kara from hurting herself, but is also illegal in Texas.
There was a guilty feeling that I had that was associated with it, but there was also fear of consequences.
When Kara turned 17, the Zartlers decide they don't want to keep their secret anymore. They believe the only way to create change is to share her story.
Did anybody say don't do this?
Yes.
Who?
Everyone.
Everyone. Your family members?
Yeah, I all did. Friends.
Because they were worried about the reaction.
Consequences. Right. It was all about, well, you're going to end up in jail over this.
That's when they decide to have Christy film Kara having a violent fit, and Mark giving her cannabis. Mark posts the video on Facebook, and it goes viral. The story makes local and national news.
On the front page on the Sunday paper.
People take notice.
And somebody in our Richardson town saw it on the local news and called 911.
And so does Child Protective Services.
It didn't take long. CPS, knock, 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 and she says, I need to talk to my supervisor. We've established a CPS case with you, and you'll be hearing from us again.
The Zartlers hire Audrey Moorhead as their attorney.
I often say that there are two agencies that you do not want to knock on your door. The first is the FBI. The second, CPS. CPS can file a petition for termination of parental rights. And what I describe that as is like the death penalty of family law.
You having a good day?
Moorhead's primary goal is to keep Kara at home with her parents.
Having a wonderful
I'm on
day.
the move.
My strategy was to impress upon CPS that, one, there was no imminent danger.
I know you're happy.
Removing Kara from the home would have more than likely resulted in her being placed in a facility.
The Zartlers had been given a choice. Let Kara continue to hurt herself, or give her the medicine that works and risk her being taken away.
That was the choice, and it had to be a very painful choice and a difficult choice. This was not a decision that the Zartlers took lightly.
Here you go.
I was prepared to go to court over whatever they did.
It's a story we've heard before. Families willing to risk everything to help their child. A story Dr. Oga Obi also knows. She's an ER physician who believes in cannabis as a medicine, but also understands the gulf between stigma and science, and is working to bridge that gap.
The endocannabinoid system was not taught in medical schools and in schools for healthcare professionals. The endocannabinoid system is the system that provides the body homeostasis, and that could be the key behind why a lot of our disease processes are resistant to allow us to heal completely. What would you like to use medical marijuana for?
I like to use it considerably for pain and appetite.
She helps patients who qualify for medical cannabis in Texas. And she's working with a lobbying organization that is targeting lawmakers.
As the cannabis industry continues to grow, it runs the risk of leaving patients behind. And so organizations like Texans for Safe Access maintain the focus that patients should be the center.
You're a conservative.
I am a conservative, a Republican.
This is often seen as an issue that conservatives don't really get behind.
That is true, but I'm also a data-driven person because of my healthcare background.
She may seem like an unlikely champion for medical cannabis, but State Representative Stephanie Klick has been leading the charge in Texas.
It's shown remarkable promise.
A former nurse, she helped spearhead the Compassionate Use Act in 2015, allowing patients with intractable epilepsy to use CBD as a medicine.
It is very difficult for a family to live life normally when you've got a child that's having 100 seizures a day.
How hard was it to get that bill passed in 2015?
It was very difficult. We were not sure that we were going to get a hearing on it.
4 years later, she helped expand the program to include qualifying conditions like multiple sclerosis, terminal cancer, and yes, autism. It was a big step forward, but the THC limits were still too low to help families like the Zartlers.
If they came to you and told you that this is our situation, what would you say to them?
I would warn them what the ramifications are in the law, and as a mother myself, I would move heaven and earth to make something better for my child if they were suffering.
The chair recognizes Ms. Klick to explain the bill.
This session, Klick is pushing to add more health conditions and also raise the THC level from 0.5 to 5%. It's a bill the Zartlers are watching very closely because it would allow them to legally give that higher THC dose to Kara.
Every day that I give the medicine to my daughter is a potential day for me ending up with a felony.
The fight to keep their daughter when we come back.
All members voting.
April 2021, Austin, Texas. 200 miles away from the Zartlers' home in Dallas, Mark arrives at the state capitol with great hope. The legislature, which meets every 2 years, is voting on a new bill which would enhance legal access to medical cannabis, specifically increasing the limit for THC from 0.5% to 5%, 10 times stronger. It's potentially life-changing for the Zartlers. Remember, it's that higher THC strain that seems to be the most beneficial for Kara.
There we go.
While Child Protective Services did allow Mark and Christy to maintain custody of Kara despite their very public admission of using the illegal THC for her autism, they still feel like they're taking a risk every time they medicate their daughter.
Your luck runs out eventually, and we're going to get in trouble unless we can get the law changed.
That part greatly concerns me because these are parents that love their child and are taking great sacrifices to protect her, keep her safe, and address her needs. Low THC
And that's what Representative Click's bill does.
I call her the queen of cannabis.
Mark watches from the House gallery.
All those in favor say aye.
And instead of the impassioned debate on the floor that he expected, the bill simply passes by an overwhelming bipartisan majority, 134 to 12.
House Bill 1535 is passed to endorsement.
Almost done. Ready? One more.
The bill does still have to go to the Senate.
There you go. Good work.
And Mark worries it won't receive the same support there.
We need more and more research.
So this is it.
But after decades of being ignored, stigmatized, there is increasingly more research in the United States as well.
He's going to start off with 130 milligrams.
There's the Montefiore study in New York we first started following in 2019. It is slowly coming to fruition. In fact, we first met Carlos and his mom, Maribel, 2 years ago.
During that trial, he became more friendlier.
I was more calm with it on, like with me on the medication. And overall, it definitely did have a nice positive effect on me.
Do you think of yourself as a cannabis researcher?
Tap, tap, tap.
There are also the labs at the Center for Medicinal Cannabis Research in California we showed you earlier.
Ready?
Answers from there are also slowly arriving.
We're seeing some pretty impressive changes.
When you say seeing some impressive changes, what do you mean?
Children whose aggressive behavior was daily and it's gone away. I mean, gone away. A lot of the kids are more social.
So what do we got?
A Deinonychus.
Deinonychus? Huh. What's the purple one?
He's easier to redirect. I can kind of like suggest like, hey, can we do this or we do this? And he'll go, okay, or yes, mom, or okie dokie.
Ezra is more patient, not hitting, not excitable,
We have to share, okay? Okay.
able to attend school.
Ez, what are you making now? Come here. Come here.
And at home, he's doing things Joanne never dreamed possible, like cooking and singing.
So what is going through your mind at this point?
I'm getting my baby back. I'm getting my boy back. We can set up the dinosaurs and
But you know, as we were talking, there was something still nagging at me.
Do you ever think that your expectations are influencing how you think he's doing?
yes and no.
And Montesaurus.
I don't know how he started changing. I don't know how he started communicating. I don't know how he started to be reasonable, how he stopped being aggressive.
She eats plants.
She eats plants, so I put her on the plants then?
Changes that have continued long after Ezra stopped taking the study drugs, almost a year ago.
He has had no regression whatsoever. I don't think it's a cure. I think it's just going to make it easier for him, you know, easier for him to live.
Interestingly, these were the same kind of long-term changes Jay also experienced.
I don't even know if I'd use the word heal, but it's just more like helping him become more himself. Like what he has a right to. He has a right to be healthy, to be happy, to feel joy. And this has certainly helped him do that, and that's all I can ask for.
I want to be very clear again. No one is saying there is a cure for autism. This isn't either.
You're jumping.
But the idea that cannabis might not just treat the symptoms of autism, but also help repair, even protect the brain, is something that came up again and again with the scientists I spoke to.
I don't know. All I can tell you in terms of concrete things is that some of the kids who've shown an effect on whatever they're taking show it for several weeks after the study drug is taken away. And some seem to maintain some improvement, but I don't know why that would be. I think it's certainly important to continue studying it to try to figure out how it works, if it does.
Until then, it's still an uphill battle in Texas. Ultimately, the THC part of Representative Click's bill doomed when it got to the Senate.
Patients in specific medical need.
The levels only raised to 1%.
My intent then and still is to have a truly medical program that follows the scientific data.
People are concerned that this could lead into recreational abuse.
The conservative lawmaker and grandmother to a boy with autism is not giving up.
I'm trying to move the ball a little further down the road.
Human beings are impatient, especially, understandably, when it comes to the care of our children. But sometimes the roads are arduous and long. They take time, and there's no end in sight. And yet the Zartlers can still take immense joy that they can now travel the road at all, no longer afraid about what lies ahead.
It's just a miracle. It's just nothing short of a miracle for me.
Their story is out there now for the world to see.
I know you're having fun.
And they are at peace with that. They once believed they would lose their child, and now revel with their belief every day that instead she was found with the help of a plant.
The sun is setting, it's beautiful.